On today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, we'll be comparing where the Pistons are right now to the Philadelphia 76ers process situation with Dub.W. It's going to be a fun episode. Stay tuned. Today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So over the last few weeks, I've had a lot of you guys, a lot of my listeners, ask me, can you compare the Pistons rebuild, where they're at right now, to the Thunder, to the Sixers, to the Rockets? Just compare where the Pistons are at, how the rebuild has gone versus other rebuilds. And I decided to get my guy W on the podcast to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Those of you guys who are into the Madden community or play Madden and play video games, you guys know who W is. W, thank you for coming on, man. I know how busy you are in the Madden community, everything you got going on, so I appreciate you taking time to come out. But W is a huge Philadelphia sports fan. When it goes to the Eagles, to the Sixers, he's a big Philly sports fan. So I'm interested to talk about this with you today, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me, dude. I mean, I know I play Madden, and that's a passion of mine, but the Sixers might have been my first love in sports, and Allen Iverson started that and really just catapulted me into the sports fan I am today. So super locked on the Sixers, much like you guys are locked on the Pistons, so I'm definitely excited to talk about it.
Appreciate it. All right, so let's start here. So the Pistons this year, they have 13 wins, and I've said that, like, multiple times in this podcast, this is like the worst season of all time. And then I went and looked at the Sixers process. I could have sworn, I was like, I don't think the Sixers had a year worse than 13 wins, but they did. They had one in 2015-16 season when they were at 10-72. So the Pistons aren't far off in the same ballpark. But obviously the difference here with the Sixers and the Pistons at this point was the Sixers were purposely trying to lose at that point, and they were purposely losing to get high draft picks and, eventually got Embiid and Simmons. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Pistons are at a point right now where they weren't expecting to be this bad this year. They were trying to be decent. They were trying to be like the Houston Rockets of the Eastern Conference, and obviously that completely fired on them. It went completely the opposite. So what I want to start with was, a lot of Pistons fans want to know, is there anything positive to take out of a season like this? So when the Sixers were going through the process years and you had to watch that team, what were some positives that you took out of those years? And before they got Embiid, before they drafted Embiid, were there any positives that you guys took from watching that team with, I can't even name half, like, whoever was on the team?
I mean, yeah, I think you got to take individual players and see their individual growth and essentially think, like, is this player going to be someone for the future? Is this player going to be somebody that's going to play a role in 5 years, essentially? And I'll tell you what, man, I'm a optimistic fan. Like, I think my players are I thought Tony Roten was going to be the greatest player ever when he played for the Sixers at 10-win season. I don't even know if he was on the 10-win team, but Tony Roten was like the guy during the process. One player that I loved the most was Robert Covington, was a big part of those teams. I thought he was really good, but he was the best player on the team. So he looked bad because, you got Robert Covington as your best player and he's going against Durant or something like that. He's always going to look bad. So Covington was the guy that, I was like, man, this guy can play, or this guy can do something to help a team. They also had Jeremy Grant, who went on to play with the Blazers for a long time and was really good. So you just got to take the individual players and kind of just see, can they, eventually become a role player or somebody want to hold on to. But I mean, the Sixers were they were better than the Pistons. Like, to be truthfully honest, I don't remember the Pistons being good since, Ben Wallace, honestly. Like, the Sixers were in that purgatory area where they were, 7, 8, 9, 6 seed in the playoffs with Iguodala and with Drew Holiday and everything like that. So they were like pretty much the worst spot in the NBA to be, where you'll get like the 20th pick or the 14th pick, and you'll keep getting the 7 AC, because they had a decent team with Elton Brand and Thaddeus Young and Andre Iguodala. And then what they did was just, obviously they traded Iguodala early, but then they had Drew Holiday and they got rid of him. So that was their biggest star that they traded, like, so to become bad. So you say losing on purpose. It's not so much that they lose on purpose. They just become so bad that it's inevitable. And I think the Pistons are just, that bad that it's inevitable that they're going to lose. I don't think they're trying to lose. I don't think any athletes go out there and try to lose. They just become so bad that, they got no other choice but to lose. And then, but ultimately it's about the individual players at this point, man. And then it's hard to judge a coach, especially for the Sixers, because I feel like the Sixers did purposely get bad. And so it was tough we had, Brett Brown was the coach during the process and pretty much told to go ahead, go 60 games under 500 for your coaching career every single year. So they're in the worst spot to coach for the most part. Like, just go ahead and take a -60, -50 to your win-loss for your career every single year. So they're in a tough spot, but it's mostly about the individual players. Can they be somebody we can work on in the future?
So I think that's where Pistons fans are at right now. Obviously, Cade is. We'll talk about Cade a little bit later, but with the Pistons, they have guys like Simone Fontecchio. They have guys like Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, like guys like that. And seeing their individual progression throughout the year, obviously, is like the only thing you have left. The problem is, it's something that you brought up earlier, and what I wanted to ask you about was. The problem is that when you're on a team this bad habits start to pick up and they start, maybe they're playing out of roles and stuff. So some people may fall out of favor with those players. Like some people may be done with Jalen Duren. Some people may be done with Jay and Ivy. And then they could go and become really good players elsewhere. Kind of how it happened with Robert Covington, how it happened with Jeremy Grant. So I guess the question I have for you is when you were watching those process Sixers, could you tell like at that time that Covington could become a really good player in the future? Was the sense in the Philadelphia community that like, hey, this team's really bad, but Rocco looks like he might be something or Jeremy Grant, the team's terrible, but Jeremy Grant looks like he might be a player in the future. Were there players like that, or was it mostly like, man, I don't know if any of these players really are going to be anything?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you get to the point when you're 10-72 or 13-60 now, whatever you guys are, it's like the only people who care are like the sweats at that point, right? Like the real Pistons fans that are diehards, like basketball junkies. That's like, you're not getting casual fans watching. Nobody really cares other than like people that are still watching the Pistons. Because I would still watch this 10-72 team. Because you like hoops, right? It is your squad. Like there's so the people you're dealing with, the people that are listening are the diehards. So those are the people that are still watching, and the individual players. Like I said, I always in my mind gassed them up like this player. If he gets a little more like Thaddeus Young, this was kind of before the process, but if he gets some more of a jump shot, he's going to be a lord. And like I said, Tony Roten was the man because he was the guy with the ball in his hand. He just was the one. I remember Jakar Sampson was another player that was like, he would show flashes and brilliance. And I mean, Nerlens Noel was the one we traded Drew Holiday for, and you would always say, can Nerlens Noel become a dominant post player, a dominant big in the NBA? He's got the athleticism. Can he recover from his little injuries and everything? So Nerlens Noel was somebody who's like, can we see him down the line or something like that? So, but the process went on for a long time. It really did. And Jahlil Okafor was another one. How do we have Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor together? Can Jahlil Okafor become that, Zach Randolph or a low post player in the NBA that's transitioning to a perimeter game? And mentally, I always talk myself into it. Like, yeah, it'll be fine. And you could play Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor together because such and such. And I would always talk myself into it, much like a lot of Pistons fans probably are, about how good Cade can be and Azar Thompson could be this lockdown defender. Or he could be like OG Anunoby or somebody like that, and you mentally, because as I said, I'm optimistic. So yeah, you kind of mentally project the best in the players that you have, really. You kind of see them as their best future, kind of.
So I want to look at the Philadelphia 76ers roster real quick back in 2015-16, and then we'll move on to the next topic that I think a lot of people really want to talk about and really want to hear is how the Sixers moved out of the process once they got a player like Embiid, how they moved out from, 60 games under 500 to all of a sudden wanting to, hey, we got to put some players around, how they went about doing that. Did they do it successfully? All that stuff. So Pistons fans get an idea of how to do it for Cade because they failed epically at doing that this year. But if you look at that 2015-16 team, you have a guy like Jeremy Grant on there. You got Rocco on there. You got Rashawn Holmes on there. You got TJ McConnell on there. You got Nerlens Noel on there. And all of these guys, Christian Wood, but obviously Pistons fans know about Christian Wood, how that whole thing went. So, but overall, there are players on this roster that went on to be NBA players. Now, did any of them go on to be stars? No. But a lot of these, there's quite a few players, like 3 to 4 players on a team that won 10 games that went on to be, quality role players in the NBA. And I think what I take away from that for a team like the Pistons, who won 13 games this year, 17 games last year, 23 games the year before, 20 games before that one, like they haven't won over 23 games in 5 years. Like they've been in this rebuild for a minute. And like you said, a lot of fans, and I think this is my biggest takeaway that I took from what you were saying, and why I like having people from outside Detroit on the podcast is, like you said, a lot of fans want to believe, if a star could add an outside 3-point, outside shot, all of a sudden he's going to be LeBron, or if Cade can Cade become a top 10 player in the NBA? If Jaden Ivey can be consistent, get defense, he can be Dwayne Wade. Like everyone believes that the highest outcome of these players. But if you look at other teams that have been this bad, I mean, rarely do you see players come out of this as like superstars or stars or anything. And, it's fine. A lot of these players turn out to be role players. Some, like I said, Jeremy Grant, Rocco, Rashawn Holmes, Ish Smith even became the Pistons backup for a while. Like a lot of these players find roles in the NBA elsewhere. Problem is that they are asked to do more than what they probably can do. And once they move on to another team, because it usually doesn't happen with that team, as you've witnessed with the Sixers, and I think Pistons fans are going to probably see with the Pistons this offseason, is that as they move on to other teams, they'll look better with other teams because now they're in a role that suits them and they're not asked to be the franchise savior, the dynamic duo with Cade or whatever. So that's my biggest takeaway from that. I think that's real insightful and something that I think a lot of fans just need to consider. Not saying that Jaden Ivey won't be really good or won't be a star, or not saying that Jalen Duren can't be a star. It's just a lot of these things, everyone doesn't become a star. Like it can't, and on teams like this, a lot of times, you get your few, diamonds in the rough, you get your guy, and then you get going, and that's how it goes. So I think let's move on to the next topic. And I think that's where a lot of people are going to be really interested. How the Sixers moved out of the process with Embiid, and maybe the Pistons can learn a few things from that and how to move out of this with Cade Cunningham next year. We'll talk about that when we come back. That instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what I get with Stitch Fix. Easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want, no subscription required. And when they send me 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice, I keep what works and I send back the rest. My stylist always sends just right pieces, and the fit is always on point. It's like they have a style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they just get me. And if you don't love something, you can just send it right back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free with Stitch Fix. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. Again, stitchfix.com/lockedon to start feeling as good as you look. Now I got to tell you about another one of our sponsors, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championship is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time. You'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit. Only available to U.S. customers at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, Dobie. So Pistons community, a lot of people in the Pistons community feel like that, they got lucky in the draft. They won the lottery. They got the first overall pick, and now they have Cade Cunningham. And Cade is the Pistons franchise player. And everyone feels like, a lot of people feel like, okay, you got to build a team around this guy. You have to put good pieces around this guy. You got to go you got to surround him with good pieces to be able to take that next step. And what happened, which, for whatever reason this offseason, we talked about that a lot, whether it's confusion with the front office and the coaching staff, disagreements, the turmoil going on in the front office and the organization, whatever. For whatever reason, they did not do that at all this year. They didn't get any shooting. They didn't get defenders on the team. This team from top to bottom was just a bunch of misfits, to be honest. None of these guys really fit together, and it spelled for a really bad season team-wise. But the only positive that's come out of this season is Cade Cunningham has played really well. He's improved in just about every area of the game. And since they decided to stop starting one of the worst players in the NBA, and Killian Hayes next to him, he was playing exceptional basketball. And something he's talked about, or not him, but a lot of the Pistons beat writers have talked about, is that, hey, if the Pistons team record was better, he probably would be in the most improved conversation. He'd be in he'd be in conversations for other things. So, but that didn't happen. The Philadelphia 76ers got Joel Embiid on the roster in 2016, 2017. Obviously, he was hurt. He didn't play the first, first 1 or 2 years of his career?
2 years, yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. So he didn't play the first 2 years of career. So his first year really with the Sixers playing was that 16-17 season. First question I have for you is, how many of those players from like the process years remained with the Sixers when Embiid was really, maybe not his rookie year, but maybe his second year in the league, when they were legit a playoff team? Did any of those players survive the process, and how many did?
Not many at all. I really like it. Was like the one thing that the Sixers. I looked at the Pistons draft history and I can't lie, it's probably the most brutal in the history of the NBA in the last 20 years. Like let's really point to that as what's going on here, because this is I'm talking the last 10 years of basketball. There's not a winner. There's not a you didn't get anything by accident. This is actually brutal. I mean, the Sixers got lucky, dude. The Sixers were the same way. They really were like. But I will tell you, the Sixers have. I don't know what the hell you guys even do with all your draft picks. Like, this is insane. That like in the last 10 years, like you don't even have a lot of draft picks to be like. You don't even have like multiple seconds or anything crazy like that. That's kind of what's helped the Sixers in the process. But nevertheless, the Sixers got lucky. They made just as egregious errors ever. They had the Michael Carter Williams. They had the first round. They had Jahlil Okafor with the third pick. Markelle Fultz, obviously, Nerlens Noel, these players that just couldn't play. Like, they really just couldn't play. They've had bust after bust after bust. And truthfully, if you remember, the Sixers also got lucky that Embiid got hurt before the draft. He hurt his back a little bit, so he dropped to the third pick. Otherwise, he would have been the first pick in the draft. But he hurt his back, slid to the Sixers at 3. They were kind of forced to pick him. They didn't even have to decide on who to pick, because Jabari Parker and Andrew Wiggins were off the board. So it was a no-brainer. So that's why I don't even give the Sixers credit for picking Embiid, because it was lucky. So they luck into this generational player. Like, as much as you talk about like Cade Cunningham and Joel Embiid are completely different superstars. Like, Joel is a Hall of Fame player. So the Sixers lucked into this player that not only has Hall of Fame pedigree with being that tall and athletic, but just to continue to improve every single year. So that's the first staple. Then we talked about, and Joel did not play his first 2 years. So if you have this great player and he doesn't play the first 2 years, guess what? We're back in the lottery again. And we get the first pick again. Boom. We get Fultz, right, who obviously didn't pan out, but that was the first pick. And then we got Ben Simmons, who before the Hack-a-Ben was a beast. I'll tell you, the way you feel about Cade Cunningham, the way I felt about Ben Simmons. I thought Ben Simmons would be dominant in the league for 10, 15 years. I really did. But it just turned out that he just, like, once he got like embarrassed that he couldn't shoot free throws. I think that's the biggest thing that happened to him. He got embarrassed that they started fouling him like Shaquille O'Neal, and he couldn't make free throws. It cost us playoff games and playoff series because he couldn't shoot free throws, and he didn't want to be embarrassed, and it just made him less timid and just made him soft. So that kind of ruined his career, I think, really, was just him being fragile mentally. And truthfully, he didn't want it enough. He didn't want to be an NBA superstar. But the Sixers had picks after Joel, and Ben was a big, cog of the wheel during that when the Sixers became good. He was really good for 2-3 years, defensive player of the year, all defensive team, NBA All-Star, I think 2 years at least. So he was another big piece. And then the Sixers went and got JJ Redick, and this was almost pre Embiid. And then once Embiid came, and JJ Redick was a knockdown shooter and a professional player, and that's who they did. While they were as bad as the Pistons now, they went out and signed JJ Redick because they had so much cap space. So they gave, and in NBA, you had to get to a cap floor, essentially. You have to spend a certain amount of money. The Sixers just had all these bums, so they said, we're going to sign JJ Redick. And that kind of catapulted them into becoming a better team. And then once Embiid and Simmons got on the court, they really started playing a lot better. And, I mean, just those two stars alone changed the game for the most part, especially in the East. The East has definitely gotten better in the last 4 or 5 years, but it's still, top heavy, and the middle teams and the bottom teams you can roll over them. And that's what Joel Embiid kind of did, and just became a really good team. And then I remember they would add players. I remember they signed Bellinelli and Ilyasova, who were really good role players. But I mean, you guys had a really good role player. Bogdanovich was, I don't know if he got hurt a lot, but he was, that dude kills the Sixers. Dribble, pass, shoot. I mean, I don't know what other player you have on the team that dribble, passes, and shoot other than Cade. I don't know what other player does that for you guys now. But Bogdanovich was one of those players. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not going to tell you I'm a Piston expert, but, like I said, the biggest difference is Joel Embiid and Cade Cunningham are different. They're different animals, really, and the Sixers got lucky to get Joel Embiid, but they made little moves, and then those two stars became stars, and they had hella picks. They were able to trade for Tobias. They were able to trade for Jimmy Butler because they had so many second-round picks, first-round picks, pick swaps, everything like that. And looking at the Pistons draft history in the last 20 years, you guys might have had 20 draft picks total.
So that's there.
It's like that's one of the biggest differences. The Sixers traded Drew Holiday for draft picks. They traded their good players, just accumulate draft picks, and at some point, man, if these guys aren't what they are, they just trade them for draft picks, even second round picks, late first round picks. They get them out of here.
So there's a lot of things there that I think Pistons fans will draw from that. And the first place I want to start with is you mentioned how after the Sixers drafted Embiid, they had picks still. They had a chance to get Fultz, and I think that Fultz draft was Tatum's draft, I believe. So they had that draft. Then they had Ben Simmons. They still had top picks to add to Joel Embiid, just like the Pistons have. The Pistons drafted Cade, and the draft picks that they've taken after Cade have been Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Asar Thompson. It's not to say that those guys are bust or anything already, but they fell to 5 back-to-back years. They didn't get the top pick in Wemby's draft that they're having the top odds. They didn't, they didn't get to stay with their draft spot when in the Paolo, Chet, Jabari, Keegan draft. Like, they fell, and so they missed those guys, which, like you mentioned, a lot of it does play to luck. But then a lot of it as well, it comes, like you said, to drafting. If the Pistons added I had someone say this to me the other day. If the Pistons had taken a Jalen Williams of the Thunder at 5, all of a sudden you're like, oh, Troy Weaver's a great drafter because now you got Cade and Jalen Williams next to each other. It's like, oh, God, and who knows what Cade would look like? Who knows what the team would actually be doing right now? So I think that's the first thing, is that the Sixers were able to add another star next to Embiid with picks after that. And that next thing you said is that they used their cap space to bring in quality players. They brought in a JJ Redick, a movement shooter who could space the floor out, really play with two guys who weren't really outside shooters in Embiid and Simmons, allowed them to run different actions. Pistons haven't done that despite having that cap space, like you said. They haven't brought in those type of guys. I'm looking at their roster from the Sixers in the 16-17 season to the 17-18 season. The only player I see on this team still from back-to-back years is Joel Embiid and Robert Covington and Rashawn Holmes. Those are the only 3 guys I see. I see Ben Simmons added. I see Dario Saric, who was another pick that the Sixers got, that they were able to add to the team, who was a role player, a JJ Redick, a TJ McConnell. Actually, he was on the team before, but like you said, Ersan Ilyasova, a Marco Bellinelli, like guys who just spaced the floor around your 2 best players and helped them, win 52 games that year. That's not something the Pistons have done. They haven't went out and added shooters. They haven't used their cap space to actually add NBA players. The Pistons don't really even have NBA players on their roster. So it's another mistake right there by the front office. I think the biggest one, too, that you mentioned, which I've been screaming on the podcast, and then we'll wrap up this segment. We'll keep talking about this, but we got to get the ad in real quick. But picks. The Sixers rebuilding teams have picks. They accumulate picks during their rebuild. So when they're ready to move out of their rebuild, they can make the trades like you mentioned for a Jimmy Butler. When they can make the trades for someone like a Tobias Harris, and when they can make trades and just have that flexibility to make moves. And instead of this Pistons rebuild accumulating draft picks and trading off guys at their highest value, they waited till Bojan's value was low and ended up having to move him and Burks to the Knicks. They waited till Jeremy's Grant value went lower. They didn't, at the beginning of the rebuild, they didn't trade for big contracts to get picks. They signed Jeremy Grant. They signed Mason Plumlee. So I think just listening to how you described what happened with the Sixers is just so markedly different than what the Pistons front office decided to do, but it's not really that different situations. The Pistons drafted Cade and still had top 5 picks after that. They didn't get another star. They didn't draft another one. They've had cap space. They haven't went out and drafted or signed NBA players, not even like great players, just NBA players to play with Cade. And they haven't accumulated draft picks. So now they're entering this offseason where they're going to have to now give up on one of their top 5 guys because they're the only assets they got. Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren is the only assets they have because they don't have a lot of picks now. So I really, that's the segment I really was looking forward to because it just shows the stark difference in how the Sixers navigated their process and how to move out of it by, again, putting role players around Embiid that fit, hitting on picks after Embiid, and then using their flexibility that they had gained with their picks during the rebuild to then make trades for guys that take the next level. And the Pistons just haven't done any of that. No matter what Cade becomes or what he actually is now, the front office hasn't done any of that stuff for Cade. And it's really set them, whether Cade's going to become a superstar or not, you haven't even really gotten a chance to figure out what he could become because you haven't done anything like that. So when we come back, I want to continue this discussion and continue to talk about the differences between the Sixers and the Pistons. Stay tuned for that. It's getting really interesting. We'll talk about that when we come back. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. A few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I wasn't experienced in any of this stuff. I went and got FanDuel on my phone, and I haven't turned back since. It's super self-explanatory. It's very easy to use, very safe for you, and it's a lot of fun as well. There's all kinds of things you can do on FanDuel. I still use it to this day, almost every day. Probably a problem of mine, but it is what it is. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Again, I want to thank you, W, for coming on, man. I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you coming on here and giving Pistons fans out there an insight into how the Sixers moved out of their rebuild, how they went about their rebuild, and how they got to where they were. So I guess the next question I have for you is this. At what point, obviously, like you said, I do want to make this clear too. You said this, and it's fair. Embiid is a generational player. He is a Hall of Fame player. We think Cade Cunningham is amazing. We think he's a different level of a prospect, but Embiid was the next tier of a prospect. Embiid is a generational prospect. And even if we think Cade can become a top 10 player in the NBA, Embiid is an MVP. He is a surefire Hall of Famer. They are a different level of prospects, and who knows where Cade will end up at, but obviously Embiid is different. He was very different at that time. My question for you is, at what point as a fan watching the Sixers did you feel like, because right now for the Pistons, like they're in year 5 of the rebuild now, and it's like, God, at this point you have to make moves. You have to make a trade. You have to go all in. You have to do something to try give Cade a team to see how good he actually can be, where he can lead them. At what point did the fan base and the Sixers feel like, you know what, we are going to make moves for Embiid and we're going to try to put pieces around him to really see what he can be? Was it instantly? Did it take a minute? How long did it take you guys to feel like, okay, gotta go make these moves now?
Well, Embiid was the man, but like we said, we had to wait 2.5 years. Even his third year, he only played half the season or so. So it was like, he was it wasn't about getting new pieces. Like he was the piece we were going to get that was going to change. Once he starts playing, he starts going. Like I said, they had Reddick balling already, so they already had like established veterans in some spots, and it definitely helped to bring him in. And once he started playing, it was all right. We got Simmons, and then we went and got Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler, and like the same season they got Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler. They had enough draft picks and all that and different players to be able to make those 2 trades in one season. And bringing in players like that, you guys watch Tobias. He's the most solid player you can get in the NBA. He's not great at everything. He's just good at everything, really.
Can I ask you a question about that right there, actually? I know the Sixers traded for – I think this is what Pistons fans are scared of. So, actually, I probably should have led with this. The Pistons fan base is scared of making a mistake by going all in. By trying to make moves. So
look like this. Y'all been making mistakes in the draft for 30 years. I mean, I don't know what you haven't made that wasn't a mistake. Like at this point, like we gotta, listen. I'll be honest. I was like you, and Drew Holiday was my man because he balled out as a rookie against the Bulls when Derrick Rose got hurt, and him and Lou Williams and Iguodala. I loved that team, and Doug Collins was the coach. I loved that team. They played so hard. I remember going to watch them play the Bulls in the playoffs then, and it was like, we're in the playoffs, we're fighting, we're not going to win the championship, we got no shot, LeBron is on the Heat or what. It's just we have no shot, but we're going to fight. So I love that team, and I woke up. I remember that NBA draft. Drew Holiday obviously has brothers. I think Justin Holiday was on the Sixers at that time. Like he was like a super reserve on the Sixers, and I remember seeing the Sixers trade Jay Holiday, and I swore it was Justin Holiday. There's no way we traded our best player on draft night. I'm thinking, who are we going to get to add to Drew Holiday? Because like you were thinking with Kay Cunningham was like, man, Drew Holiday is going to get a little bit better. He's going to get better. He's going to become a superstar. So I was thinking, who are we going to get for Drew, or who are we going to get to play with Drew Holiday? Come out that night, we traded Drew Holiday. So I was like, this is a mistake, right? And that's what started the process. And what I meant by earlier when I said they just got so bad that they were losing, it was inevitable that they were going to lose. And that's why what they did, trading Drew Holiday, So, at this point, you guys can't do much worse, so I don't know what you're afraid of making a mistake. And basketball is pretty cut and dry in that, like, you kind of know, like, a player is not going to, like we talked about, he's not all of a sudden going to become a top 5 player in the league. Like, you kind of know, like, all right, this dude is different. I would say Shea right now is kind of like the one exception to where he was a solid player, and now he's become an MVP. Yeah, now he's like an MVP talk. Like he was the 11th pick, and now he's becoming like, and it's been 3 or 4 years, and now he's becoming an MVP candidate for sure. And truthfully, I don't think that team is amazing outside of him. Like it's Cade is. I mean, we can't have 10 wins next year if you're Cade Cunningham, right? Like, dude, like what more do you, it's not like, Shea is out there with LeBron and Kevin Durant and just this beautiful cast of players. They're all young players. They're all, capable players, but they're not, superstars that he's playing with. He's really elevated that team because he elevated his game, so he's the one dude I would look at and be like, all right, this dude was a late lottery pick and has become an MVP candidate. But most of the time, cut and dry basketball, you're like, all right, this dude is a guy. Like Embiid was a guy when he stepped on the court right away. Wembanyama obviously is a guy. Once he stepped on the court right away, you knew, all right, this is a guy that's going to be, here for 10 years or so. So like I said, I'm not in the Pistons circle, but I still think there's question marks around Cade. Is he that type of player, like where he's going to be a perennial all-star? Because, like, in the first pick of the draft, if you don't get a perennial all-star, one, you either got unlucky that you had a bad draft class. You don't. Obviously, you guys were the worst team in the league last year and got the 5th pick. That's pretty bad, right? That's pretty unlucky at the end of the day. So you guys kind of got the shaft on that one in the Wembanyama draft. I mean, just think about if you had got the first pick last year and you had Wembanyama and Cade, okay, now we have a team that, can really cut out. So you got to get kind of lucky, but at the same time, you got to find something with these picks you guys got, because you have had picks, you've had top 5 picks, and they've just been, mediocre for the most part, if that.
So I want to ask, before we wrap up the podcast, I want to ask you this. When the Sixers, the Sixers went all in and they made moves for Tobias and Jimmy Butler.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say that it, like, I mean, I'm sure Sixers fans probably, actually, I won't speak for Sixers fans, but I would say from my outside perspective, some Sixers fans probably say it failed. I wouldn't say it failed from my outside perspective because you guys won a lot of games, but that's also come from a person who has watched 20 wins every year. So I mean, but my question for you is, when I said that Pistons fans, it seems like they're scared of making a mistake. Where I wanted to go with it was, so the Sixers made that big move. It was a huge move they went to get Tobias and Jimmy Butler. Those are some big moves to take.
Mm-hmm.
And years later, they have retooled, and now they're right. I mean, if Embiid doesn't get hurt this year, they're obviously like top 2 seed, maybe whatever. But they've retooled after that swing. Okay, they swung and missed for the finals to try and make it to Eastern Conference. They swung and missed, but it wasn't like it was just death sentence. It wasn't like, oh, now we're screwed. It's over. Now we can't do nothing. Could you speak to? Because that's why I've been trying to say to Pistons fans. A lot of people feel like, oh, if you go and make this move now you're screwed for the next 6 years. This better be the all-in move. You better win a championship with this roster. Is that really the case? Can you retool after taking a swing? Can you retool after missing on a swing? Or do you think that once you make a swing, it's over? That's it. That better be the home run swing, and you're screwed if it doesn't hit.
I mean, the one constant, again, is Joel Embiid. Without him, the Sixers are probably in the lottery. So like, if you still have that cornerstone of your franchise, you can add whoever the hell you want around him. I mean, he's going to win games, especially in the regular season, dude. The Sixers are going to win 60 games every single year if they have that caliber of a player in their lineup, so that's the biggest constant. And the Sixers also, I mean, low-key got lucky in the draft with Maxey. He was the 21st pick. So like, I mean, he's become a star because he's just
it sounds like the Sixers front office
year.
is just way better than the Pistons.
It's not good. Let's be honest. It's not. There's probably certainly way better. But this is the thing, and I'll tell you, every single NBA team, I would tell you, is everybody has busts and hit and misses like this. There's not that many great NBA players walking around the earth, dude. There's not. You see, the NBA All-Star game has been the same for how many years? Like the best players are the best players in NBA, and the best players win championships, and the best players win games in the NBA. You're low key not winning championships because of a front office in the NBA. You're not. You're winning games in NBA because of your superstar players and how they elevate the team, really. And that's been the Joel Embiid problem. How does he elevate the team in the playoffs when he's playing against 5 people playing defense on him? When he's playing against the upper echelon coaches that are scheming to take his ISOs out of the game, how does he elevate his team? And that's been the downside, man. And that's how you win. You see how Jokic is the best player in the league because he just elevates the entire team that is also good, but he elevates them. And that's what you have to say. Can Cade elevate an average team like Shea has elevated a really good, a solid Oklahoma team to one of the best teams in the West? So that's pretty much, how the Sixers have been able to retool because they have that one player, and they also got Maxey as well, so that helps a lot.
So I take that. This is my takeaway from that answer is that if the Pistons believe that they have someone if they feel like they have a franchise player in Cade Cunningham, you shouldn't be afraid of anything because you can retool something. So if you don't believe in Cade, then then you should be scared moving around. But if you believe in Cade, you can't be scared to make moves because right now being scared to make moves has got you 10 wins, has got you 13 wins, has got you 20 wins, has got you 16 wins the last few years. So if they believe in Cade, you need to be aggressive and you need to make moves. And also, maybe hit on a mid round pick like the Sixers did with Maxey. Yeah. Maybe hit on a
But like, what is the move they're afraid to make? Like, I don't understand.
Well,
what is the proposed move of the fan base right now that they want?
So without running on too long, I'll give you a quick synopsis of what's going on. So basically what it's at right now at the Pistons community, from all the leaks, from what I understand, from what I've heard, and from what the beat writers have heard and written out and everything, the Pistons have one untouchable. It's Cade. They're building around Cade. And then it seems like this offseason they're going to get extremely aggressive and dangle Jay and Ivy, a Jalen Duren. It doesn't seem like Asar is touchable, but if a good deal comes around, it seems like they want to build around Cade and Asar. But Jalen Duren and Jay and Ivy now are dangled. And there's a lot of Pistons fans who are like, man, Jalen Duren is only 20 years old. Jay and Ivy is only 22, 21 years old. Why are you trading? Don't make a mistake. If you trade them, that's a mistake. In 3-4 years, they could be really good. So it's a lot of back and forth right now of Cade's ready to win right now. Cade's good enough to have good teammates around him right now. And then the other section is, well, let's just be patient because these guys are young. Let them grow with Cade. And then when they eventually become good, they'll be good. Just add other pieces around them. So that's where the scared comes from. They're scared because let's just be honest. The Pistons have traded away a Chris Middleton before, and he's went on to be a star. They've traded away guys that went on to be at least quality role players. So now they're worried that, hey, if we trade Jane Ivey, if we trade Jalen Duren, now it's going to blow back in our face. So if you're going to trade them, it better be a surefire home run that you're hitting with it. So that's basically now I would say that's probably how the Pistons front office has felt, because that's why they find themselves in a situation where they have literally no veterans and no NBA players in their team outside of 20-year-olds. And that's basically how they've gotten here. But yeah,
they had him this year, and y'all traded him.
I mean, Bojan
and Burks.
Well, Burks, to be fair, I don't think either of those guys are really that good. Burks has fallen out.
They're not. They're just super average veteran role players.
Bojan they were average role players, but yes, the problem is that if your average role players are leading by bad example, not playing defense, actively not caring really on that end of the floor, and then they just want to soak up touches on offense, you're not really generating good habits.
Well, that's your coach.
Well, that's
your coach.
Let's
just be if we're allowing dudes to not play defense and then run the offense, that's your coach, dude. And that's ultimately, I mean, the coach that's taking all the losses now might not be the coach that's going to be. That wasn't the way for the Sixers. Like I said, the coach that took all the losses, they got him out of here.
I mean, well, the Pistons fans are done with Monty, and it seems like Pistons franchise is also done with Monty. So we'll see, what happens there. But they've been. When I tell you, I know you obviously not in the Pistons circle, but when I tell you this is the most critical I've ever witnessed the Pistons beat writers and Detroit media of a coach. Usually they are not very. They don't go at the franchise like this. Usually they're they step around a little bit. They have been very critical of the coach this year, so it doesn't look like he's coming back. And I think your point of that's the coach is very head on. I think a lot of Pistons fans will agree with you with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, maybe you got your first round pick this year.
Yep, but I think they might trade that, so we'll see what happens.
You got to have salary cap. You don't have one goddamn good player, right? You got to have 2 max spaces.
They got $60 million cap.
$60 million. So you can get, but who the hell is going to the Pistons, I mean, that's another thing the Sixers did. They did go out, this was 15, 20 years ago, and got Elton Brand, who wasn't a crazy good player, but he was Tobias Harris, he's that dude, that's not good enough to have a max contract, but all right, we got to give a max contract to somebody. And that's what the Sixers did with JJ Redick. All right, dude, here, take $30 million a year. You're not a $30 million a year player, but we have the money, we have to spend it, and we need a player that's going to help and contribute. So you got to be looking for a mid-tier player that you can pay, and you're going to overpay him because you have the money, and that's the only way the hell they're coming to Detroit to play with a team that's in the last place, right? So you got to find it. You're not going to get, the biggest superstar in the world to walk down and play, but you're going to get a mid-tier player like Tobias Harris, who's not going to be on the Sixers next year, who's super average, but super solid, right? And you're going to have to overpay 1 or 2 of those players. That's the step the Sixers took with JJ Redick. If that's something you guys want to do, but you're going to overpay him and you're going to hate him, just like Philly hates Tobias because we overpaid him, so.
That's what they need to do. That's what we've been talking about a lot throughout the year, and that's probably what they're going to do, and that's what you need to do. When you're a small market like Detroit, that's the only way it's going to work, and that's how you help develop your young pieces, by getting those type of players. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, W, for coming on, man. I really appreciate you coming on, man. If you guys somehow don't know who W is, you're not in the Madden or in the video game community, go hit him up on Twitter at dub.w. You can follow him, obviously, on there. You can hit up his YouTube. It's dub.w on YouTube too, right?
Yep.
So you can follow him over on YouTube. You can hit him up on TikTok. I'm telling you, I've been a big fan of W for 5 years. I've been subscribed to his channel for 45 months, I think it is now. But
there it is.
W is the Lord, man. W is the Lord. Appreciate you coming on, man. I appreciate it.
For sure. I appreciate you having me. At the end of the day, dude, Joel Embiid is a difference maker. He is. You guys got to find that one player. He's going to change everything, really.
All right, we'll see what happens. I appreciate you guys for listening, man. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.